Welcome. I'm Joel Olison, and today we're going to be talking about democratization of AI, talking about Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex. Really, this is all about Microsoft's initiatives around content services. But I want to help you understand what Microsoft's doing in the enterprise space as it relates to AI and advanced AI. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Joel Olison, as I said. I'm a director at Proficient. I'm a Microsoft MVP and Microsoft Regional Director. And I've been working with the Microsoft technologies for about 20 years, at least even longer than that. But I've been working with SharePoint and or what would later be called SharePoint. I was actually the first hire at Microsoft related to the SharePoint technologies, and also worked on the early versions of what would later be called Office 365 or Microsoft 365. I work for Proficient in their Microsoft practice as a director. We've helped many millions of customers or millions of people in those customers to the cloud, to the Microsoft cloud. And we are frequently Partner of the Year. We have more than 300 certified consultants focused on Microsoft. But I'm here to talk about AI and really help you understand what's going on in the enterprise as it relates to AI in the enterprise and what Microsoft's doing in relation to content services, and specifically Project Cortex and SharePoint Syntex. I want to give you some context to those projects and why they're so important for you. I want to help you understand what it means to the business, and then we'll wrap things up. So let me talk about AI in this information age. Now, you may have heard this quote, "If HP knew what HP knows, we would be 3 times more productive." That was said by their former CEO back in the 80s. Think about that for a second. Organizational intelligence. If we could just be more connected, know what the organization itself knows, being able to tap into that knowledge, the amount of productivity that could come out of that. Now, when you start talking about people being connected to each other, in my head, especially thinking about Star Trek, I think about the Borg. And how much easier it is for them to operate as an organism. Now, I know we're not after the Borg and we're not trying to go after those kinds of ideas, but just the idea of being more connected as an organization and being able to tap into organizational information. Now, understand that 90% of data in existence has been generated in the last 2 years. In fact, the estimate going forward, they say in the next 2 years, 5 times the amount of data that was generated this year will be generated in the next 2 years. So the amount of information that's being generated is growing, continuing to grow exponentially. You think about the billions of Office documents that are created every year. People are still faxing information and digitizing information that is currently on paper. And even in 2020, every single person is generating 1.7 megabytes of data per second. And that's an increasing number. And when you think about IoT and even the modern productivity, our ability to create content so much easier, the projects, the online, what we're doing in the consumer space, I mean, it's amazing how much data we're actually generating daily. And then when you start thinking about our ability to retrieve, I don't know if you guys think about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Or not the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones, and when he went to go get the Ark of the Covenant. At the very end of the movie, there's a scene where it zooms out and you see this massive warehouse. And Indiana Jones is all frustrated because he's like, where did they do it? What are they going to do? And they go, oh, we got our top people on it. And it's just sitting in the middle of this warehouse that'll probably be lost. Now you think about that, and even the treasures of the world in our museums, our ability to classify, categorize, they say that half of our treasures, half of the world's information is actually miscategorized. It's incredible just how much of a travesty it is that even the things that we think we know, we actually don't know. We have a big problem of our ability to sort and classify. And this does continue to exacerbate in the enterprise. When you talk about people saving files or scanning content, and we give it these names or we give it these numbers, thinking that they're going to be cataloged in such a way that it'll be easy to retrieve them. But ultimately, it continues to be a problem as we hunt and peck and search and search and search, trying to find information. And I think all of us individually even see the problem on our own computer, on our own file system. We try and save something, we try and get it back, and we struggle. So these information management challenges in the enterprise have been categorized in these kind of 4 ways. The silos of knowledge. They say a typical enterprise has something like 5 content management systems. So think about that for a second. 5 different content management systems in an enterprise. So absolutely, those are silos. But when you start talking about the departments themselves, or the teams and how they each individually are storing content across those 5 systems, it ultimately does lead to this search and discovery knowledge failure, where our ability to actually find the data we're storing is a massive problem. And then we have all this data that's actually in people's heads, untapped knowledge. And then we get the knowledge drain for people who are leaving the organization. That people retire, or, hey, we're in IT and we see it a lot. People rarely spend more than a couple of years in an organization. And the knowledge drain continues. You get that turnover that happens. So how can we unlock knowledge? Well, what's interesting is something like 5% of knowledge in an organization is digitized. It's in files, it's in records, it's in documents. That data and information is known as explicit knowledge. Then we've got 95% that's actually tacit knowledge. It's experience. It's the thinking and competency of what people learn by going through an experience. There's an illustration of a firefighter where you've got the seasoned firefighter. His ability to say, I know what it's like when it's dangerous and when I need to leave. But how does he convey that to the new firefighter who has not seen that many fires? How do they convey the ability to say, hey, this is going to come down, knowing when to leave, when it's dangerous, when it's too dangerous, or when it's okay to run in and grab somebody versus when it's that tacit knowledge, that experience is very difficult to convey. But our ability, if we knew what the questions were, and so sometimes it's finding the right tools or finding the right way of being able to unlock that knowledge. And so tacit knowledge with social kinds of applications can kind of ferret out those types of experiences into knowledge bases. Or especially when you start talking about forums and that kind of thing, it encourages us to interact. And if we can take those interactions and actually turn them into something that becomes explicit. And I do believe Microsoft Teams helps us in a big way there. And in some cases, even Yammer with Q&A and that kind of thing. So our ability to unlock knowledge often leads by connecting people to knowledge and knowledge to people. These expertise networks of being able to connect people between that knowledge and being able to say these are domains of knowledge and topics of knowledge, and that ability to tap into the expertise is really what we're trying to accomplish here. And Microsoft You may have heard of graph. It's this underlying fabric that allows the files and content to be connected to knowledge, the expertise, and insights. So basically, we've got this knowledge graph, essentially, that this is focused on. So our ability to tap in and get information about the content. Instead of just having a bunch of files there, we know who created those files. We can actually sort and organize those into domain knowledge or topics, and then gain insights as to who is doing those things and get analytics around frequency and who's contributing to those domain knowledge and so on into the topics. So the graph is getting more and more powerful, and you think about the APIs as you're building applications, or even Microsoft 365 itself, being able to tap into that and to provide interfaces into this knowledge graph, and our ability for applications we build to tap into this. Now, I've been talking a lot about AI. Microsoft is the leader in terms of investments in patents related to artificial intelligence. This machine learning, essentially this deep learning and neural networks, over 154,000 patents have been filed since 2010, and this is actually, this article itself is a couple years old. So when you talk about the hundreds of thousands of innovation that's actually happening in this AI space, Microsoft is leading this, so you can understand you're in the right place. And when we start looking at what is artificial intelligence and this machine learning, these are essentially things that humans would do, but we actually have the machines are starting to understand speech and vision and language detection, translation, and in each of these areas, the machines are actually getting better and better, like facial detection, object detection. These things have actually gotten much, much better, where you may have heard or seen even projects where it's like they're trying to use cameras to detect these rare spotted leopards, and now they're actually better at it than humans. Looking at a photo, trying to detect how many leopards there are in a given photo. There's some really interesting things online around that. But our ability now is being tested, essentially, and you think about it from a speed perspective, absolutely. Once you teach the computer how to recognize an object, it can be much, much faster, and the accuracy is continuing to improve. So what Microsoft has done is it's built a number of these capabilities, not just vision, but across speech to text, text to speech, and every year these things are getting better and better and better. Language understanding, from a search perspective, when you start talking about video search of who's speaking when, the ability for us to be able to process this content. You know, you think about storing a video or an audio file, it's only as good as whatever metadata we put, the file name or whatever on it. Well, think about if it could actually understand the content, and now we have the entire transcript and being able to understand who's speaking when. So our ability to target right at this very specific part of a video has never been better. So our ability to go back to all of our content and be able to categorize it and actually have much, much improved search experience on it. And like you've probably seen in the Microsoft Teams sessions, they're talking about more and more of our ability to actually record these. And now we've actually got more domain knowledge, and our ability to tap into that has never been better. So when you start talking about that as kind of a baseline of the capabilities that are in the platform, and now we actually add on this advanced AI to harness this collective knowledge of automated object detection, knowledge summarization, so the ability for it to actually read the document and summarize it super powerful for being able to understand what is actually in the content. The forms processing and automation kind of capabilities, as well as classification, entity extraction, being able to extract out of that content, make it much more discoverable and searchable. So now let's actually talk about what is this SharePoint Syntex, what is Project Cortex, this initiative. And I know up to this point we've been kind of talking about the industry or what's happening in this space. So let's first talk about the challenges. So we talked about these silos in the organization, the error-prone nature that humans have in terms of labor-intense data entry, trying to interpret what are in these files and putting file names on them or putting metadata on them. Managing and applying metadata taxonomies, like, oh, humans are not so good at taxonomies, let me tell you. Everybody categorizes data differently. All you have to do is look at a file share and you can see just how different one team categorizes to the next. Do we organize by date? Do we organize by location? Do we organize by some set of metadata, city, state, or whatever? It's a big challenge, especially in the enterprise. And then you talk about compliance, our ability to actually understand where the sensitive data is so that we can apply encryption, or so that we can actually add additional security, permissions, whatever we need to do to actually uphold the regulations even for the industry. There's a lot of needs around, there's a lot of hoarding that's actually going on too. Our ability to actually focus on what's important and necessary, and even our ability to archive so that we can be more productive. And a lot of this is about productivity, but liability too. You think we're holding on to data that actually could be expunged to reduce our liability. Now, there's a number of solutions in Microsoft 365, and this is the space where it's actually getting better and better. And this is a Microsoft slide here. Content understanding. We've been talking about those capabilities of understanding what are in those videos or what is in the audio, who's speaking, what are they saying, summarizing that knowledge, the ability to process the content, kick off automation, kick off our ability to discover the right information. And like I mentioned with the compliance, content governance. We want to be able to understand what we need to focus on, what's sensitive, what is data that's actually worth retrieving, what should actually be archived, and so on, and be able to manage it, label it, and so on. Now, this is a bit of a confusing space, and I do like this quote from Chris McNulty. He says, Microsoft's planning to offer Project Cortex as a premium product. It won't be included in baseline E1, E3, Microsoft 365 licensing. Packaging and licensing details will be disclosed at general availability product release stage. So let me first start off. Project Cortex is actually an initiative. It contains multiple products. The first of those is Project Syntex, which launched October 1st. Now that was yesterday. Now I have a little bit of insight because I just went in to my tenant to go see what it actually looks like. So I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. So as I mentioned, Project SharePoint Syntex is the first of those. It focuses on the content centers. So the content centers is basically this place where you can process files and do machine teaching, essentially. You can apply metadata or labels, automated compliance, your ability to do extraction, filtering, grouping. There's a lot of things you can do with SharePoint Syntex in those content centers. There's another part of Project Cortex which is not released around the Knowledge Center, which is the topics and topics pages, topics cards. I'm not going to dive into that part in terms of it being a product. I want to focus from a product perspective on SharePoint Syntex. So when you look at the broader Project Cortex initiative inside of Microsoft, you can actually see in Microsoft 365 that there is the Content Center, which we were just talking about, that is SharePoint Syntex. but there's these other areas like the topics cards, topics pages, and the topic center, which is essentially the knowledge center, that's connected to Graph and AI, which as well supports connectors and all this kind of stuff. But we'll dig into this as well. So we'll talk about this knowledge network, our ability to pull information into content centers and support ingestion, classification, and insights with SharePoint Syntex. So understanding Project Cortex is a bigger, broader initiative, and it will provide these essentially networks of content to pull together our ability to discover and manage data. And AI will actually do the reasoning over the content. So essentially, you've essentially got two major components to Project Cortex. There's the machine learning side of it that is doing the grouping, filtering, organizing by itself, and then recommending topics. And then you've got this other side, which is the SharePoint Syntex side, which is focused on the content centers, which is focused on machine teaching, where you can create rules, create extractors, and so on related to being able to extract data, apply metadata, and essentially building out your content centers, which can make things either more discoverable or kick off automated processes, and so on. And essentially, when you start talking about combining the capabilities of people plus AI, you get this idea of recommendations, where you can use it for enhancing content for search, getting better insights into your experts. But essentially, it is this kind of better together. Now, the broader Project Cortex, especially when we talk about this initiative across Microsoft, is really to enhance the content. This is a lot about content services, our ability to take advantage of AI to enhance what we do every day in these knowledge centers, which again is kind of more of the later release of Project Cortex, across Teams, SharePoint, and Outlook. The content center piece on the right is about our ability to feed AI our content and then teach it with a specific set of files. It could be your contracts or POs, doesn't really matter, but the idea is you're teaching it, and then you can actually set up these rules around extraction or around content understanding and enhancing the files in these content centers. And then you can take those rules, those set of extractors, and then be able to apply that across other libraries, other places where we can then enhance that content. Now, again, kind of stepping back, looking at Project Cortex more holistically, it is absolutely about connecting people to knowledge. It's about this content processing and compliance, built on top of Graph and Microsoft Content Services. Manage, organize, empower. Absolutely. These are basically a few Microsoft slides. If you're trying to wrap your head around Project Cortex, it's absolutely about helping take advantage of AI. This AI plus human curation gives us the ability to understand, take information, apply learning, and really with the summarization, being able to actually gain insights and knowledge, building these networks of topics, and understanding what our data is. In fact, I think that's one of the simplest ways of understanding what's the value of Project Cortex. It's helping you get your arms around your data. Let's find the gold nuggets in our data, and then be able to apply compliance, finding out what's sensitive or finding out what needs to be managed and making it easier to retrieve later. or using, hey, let's organize all of our contracts by, not just by date, but by categories, and being able to understand our data and kicking things off. It's essentially helping us save money, save time, and learning to do things faster. Let's learn how a human would do it and then teach the computer how to do it, essentially, without having to write a bunch of code. So I mentioned that I signed up for the trial because on day one you could do it. So a couple of insights here. When you click the start the trial, it essentially takes you through this process of signing up for it. So there's a 1 month trial by default. I have a dev tenant, so it was actually suggesting I set it up for 25 users. And then basically I click through, it then enables it and says, hey, thank you for choosing SharePoint Syntex. And then you can basically you put in the email address of the one in your work tenant, and it will check to see if you have it to enable that trial. And the trial itself can be applied to individual users. So as an example here, you assign licenses to users. So when you enable this, it's not just it lights up for everybody. It's something you need to apply to individual users. And when I was looking at it, it was showing it as like a $5 per user per month, but there's a 30-day trial. So essentially I was able to set it up on my individual account with SharePoint Syntex. And again, this is focused on the content centers. And what was interesting is I then went in to go see, where does this show up? And I could see that it's considered itself Intelligent Content Services Trial. And you can see starting on October 1st, it expires October 31st, and shows the subscription being active for that one user that I assigned when I assigned myself. So the thing I want to tell you here, and I don't have a lot of time to dig into demos today, but there is a Project Cortex demo at aka.ms/Project Cortex. There's 3 different, in fact, there's probably 4 demos now that are out there. There's a lot of great videos, a lot of great content at that Project Cortex URL. There's also a project aka.ms/SharePoint Syntex as well, where you can get more information on on SharePoint Syntex as well. Some more insights is around who are the people who are going to be working with this. Essentially, you have your content services admin, your knowledge managers, your subject matter experts. Well, the content services admin is the one who's looking at this as a service. They're monitoring the service health. The knowledge manager are the one who are actually doing the machine teaching. And then you've got the subject matter experts, these experts. They're the ones who are actually organizing content, working on it. In the case of SharePoint Syntex, you're likely going to have those people who understand the data the most who are actually going to be doing the machine teaching. And these knowledge managers can actually spend time with the subject matter experts, understand the content. Often you want people who actually understand the Power Platform, because essentially you can use automation, like say Power Automate, to kick off the workflows as well. Now, when you start talking about the different roles and the kinds of things that can be done, in the greater Project Cortex, you do have the ability to manage your content. And when we get to this, like I said, with SharePoint Syntex, the focus is more on these content centers and actually doing the machine teaching. But the knowledge centers are actually more about topics. So with the topics, it's understanding the knowledge and being able to recommend topics and so on. So there are different things for different parts of the product. And then your ability to actually leverage search connectors, these APIs, to be able to connect to backend systems like your file shares or ServiceNow or SQL databases, Azure Data Lake, intranet websites, and so on. So there's these connectors that will allow you to then be able to pull that in from a perspective of the future versions of Project Cortex, or the future products that are still coming with ingestion APIs, or even building out solutions on top of Graph against the new APIs. So there's a lot of kind of cool stuff coming with this envisioning of Project Cortex and what it can actually accomplish. And one of those is these abilities to have insights around what it can actually accomplish. So, for example, this is a screenshot of, doesn't matter whether you're in Word or on a SharePoint site or even in Teams, the topics actually can light up and it can give you insight into what's happening. And they can be human curated, but this ability for it to be able to understand the content and give you insights, pretty powerful. So what are some of the business value? Where's the business value in all this? Well, let's take a look at what's happening in a typical larger enterprise. And again, this is something that comes from the Microsoft side, from some research from Forrester. Essentially, the content classification and curation, companies are spending typically $1.2 to $3.3 million a year that is spent with humans having to curate and classify content. When that is done, there's improved discovery. You think about the discovery that is improved by having good classification. Yeah, it can mean working with your data in a lot more efficient way. So in an organization, you can see 10x plus in some cases once that discovery kicks in, and whether it's humans doing it or whether it's AI doing it. And you think about what that means as well, all this reliance on legacy tools and professional services that can then be improved through automation, through governance and control. I put some of my own thoughts into this Project Cortex, and obviously it's being broken down now into SharePoint Syntex with future releases of Project Cortex coming later this year. And I broke it into the knowledge center and the content center side of things. You've got the machine teaching, which is the syntax side where you're training, classifying, model, automating, and then you've got the knowledge centers, which is extracting, filtering, grouping, clustering. And as well, from an administrative perspective, absolutely, you can manage that taxonomy. You can seed it with terms, and that reinforcement that happens with humans interacting and teaching the AI how to interact with the data. And so when you talk about, well, what are the insights? What is the value here? Empowering teams with the knowledge and expertise in the apps you use. That's that future Project Cortex release. Streamlining business processes. There's SharePoint Syntex, right? Advanced AI harnessing collective knowledge. That probably enhances from both. Discovery. Now, discovery itself is enhanced by everything we're talking about here across Syntex and Project Cortex. Connecting people to knowledge and knowledge to people. Absolutely. These enhancements that come through understanding and connecting knowledge to people and people to knowledge makes us more easily find the experts that are connected with the data. And the organizational agility across these efficiencies, the productivity that comes, and the cost savings as a result. And then when you talk about the automation, the extracting, the tagging, we talked about some examples in audio and video of being able to see the facial detection, who's saying what, but as well the transcription, the ability to extract content out of our documents, even unstructured documents, where it can understand and you can teach it what's important in a contract or something like that may not be a full templated or maybe semi-structured document. So you get all these kind of, this high-level idea of Project Cortex or Syntex around machine teaching with the content centers, the streamlining business processes with the Power Platform. We can get our arms around our data so we can actually have more compliance and automation with a variety of different things, the classifiers, the extractors, our ability to apply labels, the connectors for the back-end data, and the tagging. Now, a lot of these, they may seem like big concepts, but there's a number of different ways we can actually kick off projects to focus on different corpuses of data to be able to really understand what's happening in either legacy or even on a day-to-day basis of where we're actually are the organization's crown jewels. And again, we'd kind of talk about the mining and topic discovery and topic management. There's a lot that we can do from a management perspective as well. So kind of just wrapping things up, I mentioned a couple of different URLs, aka.ms/SharePoint Syntex. You will find the release information, absolutely just released just yesterday as I'm recording this video. SharePoint Syntex is available. Project Cortex coming later, the one that's more focused on the topics. Then Project Cortex itself is this bigger, broader initiative inside of Microsoft, with SharePoint Syntex being the first release of that. Highly encourage you to check out the videos from Ignite and enjoy. I would be happy to connect. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is listed here. You can find out more about SharePoint Syntex on my blog, collabshow.com. And let's connect on LinkedIn. Thanks. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
Do you have to do another recording?